Let me tell you this. I never imagined that growing flowers could nearly spiral into a courtroom battle, a neighborhood-wide controversy, and one of the strangest chapters of my entire life. But somehow, that's exactly where I ended up. It all began the day I noticed my new neighbor staring at me through a pair of binoculars, as if I were operating a covert government facility, and she was enjoying every second of it. She was smiling while she watched. And that smile, that smile alone told me things were about to head in a very bad direction. So let's back up a bit. About 4 years earlier, I bought this odd-looking house in a calm suburb just outside a small town called Maple Ridge. The real estate agent described it as a flag lot, which is really just a polished way of saying the driveway was long and narrow, and the house itself sat way back among the trees, almost like it was hiding from civilization. And honestly, that was exactly what I wanted. I wasn't a social person. I liked quiet. I worked remotely as a data analyst, spent most days buried in spreadsheets, and the thing that kept me grounded was gardening. Not tomatoes, not roses. Saffron. Yes, saffron. The spice that costs more per ounce than some people pay in monthly rent. I became fascinated with it after a trip to Spain years ago. Long story short, I came home, watched around 100 documentaries, read every research paper I could get my hands on, and finally thought, all right, this is it. This is my thing now. But saffron isn't something you casually plant in a pot and hope for the best. It demands precise temperatures, exact humidity, controlled light cycles, specific soil chemistry. Mess it up by even 2 degrees and the entire crop dies. So I committed fully. I checked zoning regulations, pulled permits, hired licensed electricians, filed stacks of paperwork, and double and triple checked everything. Then I spent nearly $15,000 on a professional-grade greenhouse that looked more like something built by NASA than anything you'd find at Home Depot. Climate control, sensors, LED lighting systems, automated irrigation, backup power, the whole setup. From the outside, I can admit it probably looked suspicious, like I was doing something illegal back there, but everything was legitimate, clean, and fully documented. I kept every permit in a binder, so thick it could probably stop a bullet. For 2 years, life was good. I'd wake up, make coffee, step out onto my deck, listen to birds, check on my plants, log data, and ship orders to boutique restaurants in the city. Chefs loved my saffron. Specialty shops paid top dollar. I wasn't rich, but I was proud. Then Melissa Hart moved in next door. I didn't know her name at first. All I noticed was that the empty house beside mine suddenly filled with moving trucks and people loudly arguing in the driveway. I didn't think much of it. I'm not the welcome basket type. I assumed we'd exchange a wave eventually. That was the first red flag. 2 weeks later, she hired a surveyor. Then another one. Then another. After that, she built a 6-foot privacy fence exactly 1 inch inside her property line. Not 2 inches. Not 6. 1 inch. It was like she measured it under a microscope. At the time, I laughed it off. Wow! I told my friend Marcus over the phone, this woman really loves boundaries. I had no idea how serious she was about them yet. 3 weeks later, I was standing on my deck, coffee in hand, barely awake, enjoying the silence when I noticed movement near the fence. I squinted. There she was, standing on a step stool, holding binoculars aimed straight at my greenhouse like she was observing wildlife. Except I was a wildlife. I froze. She noticed me, lowered the binoculars, didn't wave, didn't look embarrassed, just stared for a brief moment before calmly walking back inside. No explanation. The next morning, it happened again, and the morning after that. Every single day. Step stool, binoculars, surveillance. I started joking to myself that maybe I lived next to the CIA. Then the first letter arrived, tucked beneath my mailbox flag. Cream-colored paper. Fancy letterhead. Her name neatly printed at the top. Dear Mr. Parker. Polite, sweet, concerned. She wrote about unpleasant agricultural odors drifting onto her property, about industrial equipment, about potential chemical runoff. It was written in that syrupy tone people use when they want to sound kind while accusing you of poisoning their dog. The problem was, saffron doesn't smell. My greenhouse was sealed. Filtered water. Organic nutrients. No runoff. No waste. Nothing. So I replied calmly, explaining everything in detail. I even included an informational sheet about saffron, thinking she might be genuinely curious. That was a huge mistake. 3 days later, another letter arrived. This time, she'd done research. She questioned whether my operation complied with residential zoning laws, suggested I contact the county, suggested she might have to report herself. Still polite, but now the message had teeth. Around that time, I started hearing things. Neighbors casually saying, "Oh, yeah, Melissa's bringing the HOA back." HOA? What HOA? Turns out the neighborhood technically had one, but it had been dead for years. No meetings, no enforcement. Melissa resurrected it like Frankenstein. Door-to-door flyers, Facebook posts, talk of community standards, protecting property values, uniform aesthetics. Translation, control. Then came letter number 3. This one dropped the mask. She claimed I had unpermitted electrical work, said she had photographs, said she'd already contacted a county inspector. It ended with, "I hope we can resolve this amicably, but I have a responsibility to the community." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about smells. This wasn't about safety. This was about power. That weekend, she cornered me at the mailbox. Perfect timing. I just finished a run and was sweaty and exhausted. She stepped directly into my path like a movie villain, smiling sweetly before launching into a speech about property values and visual pollution. She complained about my LED lights, said my greenhouse looked industrial. Then she leaned in and said, almost cheerfully, "I already called the county. They'll be coming soon. And I have photographic evidence of everything. Honey, I hope you have good lawyers." Honey, that word. I smiled and said, "Great, I'll get my paperwork ready." She looked disappointed, like she wanted me to panic or beg. Instead, I walked away. And that was the moment I decided that if she wanted a war fought with documents, I was going to win it. After that mailbox encounter, something shifted inside me, not in some dramatic, movie-style way with heroic music playing. It was quieter, a slow, steady realization that I was dealing with someone who wouldn't stop until she won. And that winning, to her, meant pushing me out or forcing me to submit. And I knew something else, too. People like Melissa don't fight fair. They fight with paperwork, rumors, and pressure. They wear you down until you quit. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I was going to document everything. Every single thing. A few days after the mailbox confrontation, her online campaign kicked off. Our neighborhood had a Facebook group called Maple Ridge Connect. It was meant for missing pets, yard sales, and the occasional found keys post. Overnight, it turned into her personal stage. One morning, I woke up and saw her post sitting right at the top of the feed. Does anyone else feel uncomfortable with the industrial facility built behind Lot 17 without community input? Industrial facility. She attached photos, blurry, zoomed in, awkwardly cropped. My greenhouse looked like the headquarters of a movie villain. Comments flooded in almost immediately. Is that even legal? That looks sketchy. Did anyone approve this? I stare at my phone, feeling the strange mix of anger and disbelief twisting in my chest. Then something clicked. I zoomed in on one of the images. I'm into photography, have been for years. I understand angles, distances, perspective, and I knew instantly there was no way she took those photos from her own yard. The angle was too low, too close, too precise. I stepped outside and followed the sightline myself, straight through the oak grove, 10 feet inside my property, past the stone retaining wall, past the old survey markers. She hadn't just crossed the line once. She'd been trespassing repeatedly. That night, I drove straight to an electronics store and bought a trail camera, the kind hunters use, motion-activated night vision, 4K resolution GPS stamped footage. It cost me almost $400 and was worth every cent. I mounted it high up in one of the oak trees, carefully camouflaged, aimed directly at the narrow path she'd have to use. Then I waited. 3 days later, just after midnight, I was reviewing the footage on my laptop, and there she was, clear as day, climbing over the wall, phone in hand, moving slowly, taking photos, zooming in. At one point, She walked right up to my greenhouse door and actually tried the handle. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was completely insane. She stayed nearly 20 minutes. 20 full minutes of trespassing, all recorded in ultra-high definition. I backed the footage up 3 times, cloud storage, external hard drive, USB. I wasn't taking any chances. 2 days after that, the call came. "Hi, this is Daniel Reyes from County Code Enforcement. We've scheduled an inspection for Thursday morning." His voice sounded tired. Later, I found out she'd been calling his office every single day. I spent Wednesday night organizing my paperwork, like I was preparing for trial. Permits, receipts, inspection reports, electrical approvals, zoning letters, color-coded tabs. Thursday morning, I was on my deck with a cup of coffee when the county truck pulled up, and before Daniel even stepped out, here she came, Melissa, clipboard in hand, power walking like she was late for a board meeting. "Good morning," she announced loudly. "I'm the vice president of the HOA. I filed a complaint." Daniel nodded politely. "I'll speak with you later, ma'am." Translation: "Please relax." We walked to the greenhouse. I handed him the folder. He went through it carefully, checking permit numbers, cross-referencing with his tablet, testing outlets, measuring distances, inspecting ventilation. He was thorough, professional, all business. After about 40 minutes, he smiled. "I've never seen a saffron setup like this," he said. "It's impressive." For the first time in weeks, my shoulders relaxed. That's when Melissa rushed over, like she'd been waiting for a cue. She pulled out her own folder, photos printed and ready. "This shows unsafe wiring," she said. "And this shows illegal modifications." Daniel studied the photos, looked at the greenhouse, looked back at the images, then took a few steps to the side. He frowned. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "how did you get this angle?" She blinked. I have good eyesight." He pointed to another photo. "You'd have to be standing against the wall for this one." Silence. I pulled out my phone. "Actually," I said, "I think I can help." I played the video. The screen showed her climbing over the wall, walking across my property, taking photos, trying the door. The timestamp blinked clearly in the corner. Daniel watched without saying a word. When the video ended, he let out a long, slow breath. "Mr. Parker," he said, "your operation is fully compliant. More than compliant. This is a model property." Then he turned to her. "And I'm required to document this trespassing in my report." Her face drained of color. "You interfered with an investigation," he continued, "and you wasted county resources." She started to stammer. "I was just protecting the neighborhood." He cut her off. Trespassing is not protection. He packed up his equipment and left without another word. I stood there, stunned, feeling relief, vindication, and pure exhaustion all at the same time. That same afternoon, 3 different neighbors texted me. "Dude, what happened with Melissa?" Apparently, Daniel's report traveled fast. By Monday, she was forced to step down from the HOA, and the board released a statement publicly distancing themselves from her actions. I had a lawyer friend draft a formal cease and desist letter. Trespassing, harassment, evidence attached. It was sent certified. After that, she never spoke to me again. Well, almost. About a month later, I received one final note. It was short, apologetic. She said she'd been stressed and had overreacted. I didn't reply. 2 months later, something I never expected happened. Our neighborhood announced its annual garden tour charity event. Residents could nominate properties. Someone nominated me. Then another person did. Then another. I nearly declined, but eventually I agreed. And that's where the story takes a turn I never saw coming. The funny thing is, after everything with Melissa, the inspection, the letters, the stress, the quiet win, I truly thought it was over. I thought life would slip right back into its comfortable routine. Coffee, data spreadsheets, greenhouse, repeat. But life doesn't really work like that, does it? It waits until you finally relax, then hands you one more chapter. So when the Maple Ridge Garden Tour Committee emailed asking if my greenhouse could be one of the featured stops, my first instinct was to laugh and delete the message. A high-tech saffron operation on a neighborhood garden tour? Yeah, right. But then Marcus called me. Man, he said, you went through hell over that place. Let people see it. Let them see you weren't hiding anything. That stuck with me. So I said yes. Late August, peak harvest season. Perfect timing. That Saturday morning, I woke up before sunrise, nervous like I was heading into a first date. I cleaned everything twice, polished the glass panels, organized tools, lined up small jars of dried saffron threads like museum displays. By 10 a.m., cars started lining the street. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to. Couples, retirees, a few kids dragging their parents along. Around 30 people total. I stood by the entrance, suddenly aware that I was on display. Welcome, I said awkwardly. This is my greenhouse. People chuckled kindly, and then something incredible happened. They became curious. They asked real questions. How long does it take? Why is it so expensive? Do you really pick every thread by hand? I showed them the crocus flowers, the tiny red stigmas, the drying process, the data screens, the climate controls. And I could see it in their faces. Respect, not suspicion, not gossip, respect. At the end of the tour, I gave each visitor a small glass vial with 3 or 4 saffron threads inside, worth about $20 each. No one knew that. I just said, thank you for coming. Some people hugged me. One woman teared up and told me she'd never learned anything so interesting in her own neighborhood. The local paper showed up, took photos, and ran a short article. Maple Ridge resident grows world's most valuable spice. My inbox exploded. Garden clubs, agricultural groups, even a community college invited me to speak. And then, as the last guests were leaving, I saw her, Melissa, standing in her backyard. No binoculars this time. Just standing there quietly, arms crossed. For a brief moment, I considered walking over, offering her a vial, being the bigger person, starting fresh. But then I remembered, honey, I hope you have good lawyers. The fence, the letters, the trespassing. So I just waved politely and went back inside. That night, I sat alone in the greenhouse. The LED lights hummed softly as I processed saffron, my hands faintly stained red. And that's when I realized something. The whole ordeal had changed me. Before Melissa, I avoided conflict. I stayed quiet. I hoped problems would disappear on their own. After her, I learned that boundaries aren't rude. Documentation isn't paranoia. Standing up for yourself isn't aggression. It's survival. I upgraded my security system. Cameras on every entrance. Motion lights. A smart doorbell. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Every few weeks, on a bad day, I'd rewatch the trail cam footage. Not out of bitterness. Out of gratitude. Because if I hadn't installed it, everything could have gone differently. It would have been my word against hers. Instead, truth had timestamps. That fall, I received a letter from the county, an innovative agriculture award for small-scale compliance excellence. There was a plaque, a formal letter, and even a personal note from Daniel. He wrote that he now used my setup as an example during training sessions. I mounted the plaque right at the greenhouse entrance, visible from her backyard, not out of spite. Okay, maybe 10% spite. Mostly pride. Sometimes I wondered if she learned anything. If she ever questioned her need to control everything. If she ever realized how close she came to ruining someone over nothing. I never got answers. She moved away quietly last year. No goodbye. No drama. Just gone. And now, years later, I'm still here. Still growing saffron. Still drinking coffee on my deck. Still watching the sunlight hit the greenhouse every morning. And sometimes I think the most valuable thing I ever grew wasn't spice. It was confidence. The ability to say, this is mine. This is right. And I don't need permission to exist. But here's the part that still messes with me. If I hadn't stood my ground, if I'd shut everything down just to keep the peace, everyone would believe she was right. And that scares me. How many people give up because it's easier? How many dreams quietly die behind fences and fake smiles? So I'm curious. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Tried to make peace sooner? Confronted her directly? fought harder, or walked away? Where do you draw the line between being kind and being a doormat? Between community and control? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes standing your ground isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the only way to protect what you've built.